Ability, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
No problem at all. All right, so we're on the air now. Let's see. Yeah, officially. Okay, great. So let me do the introductions first, okay? So this is the International Writers Inspiring Change, what we call the Author Shout Out Podcast, where we interview authors around the world. And today we are interviewing Suzanne Groves from somewhere in the middle of America. Where exactly are you located?
I'm in Texas, but don't hold it against me.
No prejudice there at all. Not at all.
Sure.
Okay, Texas, though. Are you in the south near Houston or
I'm in right between Dallas and Fort Worth.
in Fort Worth? Okay, great.
I'm in Arlington, actually, home of the Dallas Cowboys Stadium.
Ah, are you a Cowboys fan?
I am not.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, now I understand why it's hot, because it can get very warm in Texas, for sure.
Yes, it does.
All right, well, you're not new to the podcast. You were a guest speaker when we were doing KJ
Feeler, yeah.
Yeah, Fearless
And
interview.
it
It was a couple months back.
Yeah, and it was inadvertent. I meant to join as a guest, and then I'm sitting next to her, and she was actually really glad that it worked out that way. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Great, great. All right, so yeah, well, this podcast will go roughly between 30, 45 minutes. It depends how far we go, but usually we go about 45 minutes. At the end of it, we'll post, like we did with KJ's, we'll post the interview on our podcast page, so you can always refer people to it. We'll also send you a copy of the interview, so you can actually post it around your social media or websites or wherever.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so here we go. Yeah, so people know who I am. I'm Riala Plain. I'm an author. I'm also a reviewer for iWick. So, and I do a lot of the reviews because I'm a crazy reader and I love books. And so there you go. And I did read your book, which is entitled You'll See, right?
It is. You'll see a story of narcissistic abuse, survival, and my journey to understand. Right here.
Excellent. Yeah. I got to ask you right up, because as I was preparing my questions for this, I thought, I had this question when I read the book too. Why do you call it You'll See? Where did the idea, what's that title about it?
It actually comes from after my parents died, within 2 months of each other. I was going through their things, of course, and I found a box of letters from their correspondence on a daily basis for 1 year while my father was in Vietnam. I was a toddler at the time, and so most of the letters were pretty quotidian. And then I found one where she was saying, "You've asked about Suzanne. Well, let me just tell you, she'll wrap you around her pointy little finger. Her ability to get her way is almost diabolical." And then she's like, "Quicksilver, Stardust, and the best champagne. You'll see."
You'll see.
So I wasn't originally going to call the book that. And I was grappling with names. And then actually, as I was in the midst of writing it, after they died, my first birthday after my mother's death, my husband asked me, "What do you want to do today?" And I had copied in her handwriting that snippet of "You'll see." I said, "I want to go and get a tattoo." And so I had it tattooed in her handwriting on my wrist as a reminder of "You'll see, the best is yet to come. You'll see, you're going to make it happen. You'll see." And so it felt like an apropos name for the book, because it is really about resilience and survival, and that you can get through, you can survive a relationship with a malignant narcissist. You'll see.
That's a good term, malignant narcissist. I haven't heard that combination of words.
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, we're gonna dig into your book, and I have a bunch of questions for you. So, and as we said in the terms and conditions in this, we don't edit anything in these videos, so we just put it up as it appears. So here we go. So tell us a little bit about Suzanne. Who are you?
I'm a former marketing executive. I've lived in Texas for 54 of my almost 60 years. Um, I have been writing since I was a child. Got my first paycheck as a writer when I was 14. I was working as the high school stringer for our city newspaper, and I had my own column. Excuse me. So I always knew that I wanted to write. Was an English major at the University of Texas. Wrote for the Daily Texan there, which was the preeminent college newspaper. And then I ended up falling into a career in public relations, marketing, and advertising, where I got to write every day and make a pretty decent living doing it. So now that I'm retired, I'm writing full time. I've already got another novel that's in review, and I'm working on its prequel. And otherwise, just enjoying life, travel, keeping up with my German Shepherd, who may make an appearance. And I've got two grown children, and they're doing quite well. So happily married. That's about it.
That's great. That's great. That's I know it's quite a success story, considering as you detailed in the book what you had to go through
Yes.
to get there. A lot of the story, and you'll see, is really about your dad, who you very clearly refer to as a narcissist, abusive in not in a sexual way, but mentally, spiritually, certainly. And when I read the book, I mean, it was inspiring because it was a success story. Really, it ended with you coming out on top, which was great. But it was pretty. It kind of made my skin crawl a little bit as I read some of the stuff. Like, and I think anybody can relate to the story. And I think that's what's important about the book is that there's got to be millions of people who go through this kind of narcissistic treatment. And tell us a little bit about what you want to say about your dad and how the book, not so much how the book developed, but how your life was with him.
Impossible. It was like, and I think I say as much in the book, it was like living in a carnival funhouse where up is down, left is right. Everything was distorted. Um, I learned from a very early age to be highly um, aware, keen on every nuance in our home, so that I knew what to prepare for. My father was, uh, everything had to be his way and done on his terms and to his standard, which he believed was perfection. And so I fought constantly, trying to win his approval, trying to win his praise, trying to feel like I would ever get unconditional love from him, which I never did. Even up to his death, I did not. And even after his death, the abuse was still there in the form of letters that I found and that kind of thing. But it was just, it I had such a longing to please him and to really be daddy's girl. And I never got it. And
Mm.
my mother was rather complicit as well. But as a woman, when you were constantly criticized, not only for, A minus, not A plus, second place versus first place, but you're told, you're harassed about your weight as you're going through puberty and your body is changing, that turned into an eating disorder. When you're constantly chasing the prize that is going to be worthy enough for him to say, wow, I am so impressed with you. I was an overachiever, and it still wasn't enough. And it just felt like the goalpost kept moving. And I kept trying to accommodate it. And a lot of people have asked me, why didn't you just quit? And I did. 4 months before he died, he pushed me once too far. It's in the book. And that's when I just said, other than any contact related to my mother, who was in memory care at the time with Alzheimer's, I just I can't keep doing this to myself. And so I felt
But
some misery.
how many years were you living under that pressure that by the time you said, okay, that's it, and you turned your back
50,
on
54,
it's a lot of
55,
years. Yeah.
55 actually. No, 56. I keep forgetting how old I'm about to be. Yeah, 56 years, and it started from my first memory of him.
Mm.
So, and as I said, my mother was somewhat complicit because she too was trying to please him. And so I didn't really, there was no place to seek solace. And then another part of the, and I think this is true for a lot of narcissistic families, or, where there is a narcissist at the helm, you were told not to share the family secrets. You aren't to talk
Right.
about the family outside of the family. So I've had people ask me, did you talk to friends about it? No. Did you talk to teachers? No. I didn't talk to anybody about it. So it was a very quiet torture.
And that's because he does impose a sort of uh, insists on the silence, on keeping it within.
And it was very much you either pick me or you pick everybody else. And kind of a constant, the way I kind of term it is kiss the ring. Loyalty was to always be shown no matter what. And the few times that I didn't, it was met with consequence.
Not physical, but abusive, and or was
Well,
it physical?
I mean, there were a couple of moments where, he assaulted me once when I was a teenager, and once, excuse me, about 2 years before he died, where he had me by the throat and shoved me. But mostly it was physical from the standpoint of deprivation. So it's in the book, but when my first husband and I had our daughter, he had said point blank, I'm starting a college fund. And so we assumed that he did. And then I called him on some of his nonsense, called him out on it related to his philandering. And we didn't speak for a few months. And then that Thanksgiving, he and my mother were at our home for Thanksgiving dinner with my now 3.5-year-old. And I mentioned college came up somehow, and he said, "Well, I hope you took my advice and opened that college fund that I told you." And I looked at my then husband, and he kind of looked at me, and I said, "Dad, you said that you were going to start a college fund for her." And he said, "No, I didn't." And at that
So it
point,
sounds like a form of gaslighting you. Is that
it,
what?
it was gaslighting, and it was also punishment for the fact that I had challenged him. So whether or
Yeah.
not he had started a fund, the point was we had to scramble. That we had basically 14 and a half years to accumulate enough that we could put my daughter through college, which we did. But that's just one of so many examples of um, money was his weapon, and among other things. And so that was very much designed to let me know that there would be a consequence if I were to, in his mind, betray him again by sharing with my mother things that he had told me and then told me to keep secret. And it's just an impossible position to put a child in, a teenager in, a young mother. I had a life that I was trying to lead, and he just kept permeating that life, and to where I had to please him before worrying about everybody else. And it's hard to explain why I couldn't not do it. I just couldn't. The desire was too great for me to give up.
The desire what? To get his approval, you mean?
The desire to
Did,
really
did,
have.
did he set the goalpost on what he expected from you at an earlier time? Did he actually vocalize it? Like he said, you have to be a perfect daughter and before I'll ever accept you? Or
There was, he was always nitpicking on everything. If I won an award, well, what does that mean? Do you get any money? He's always kind of denigrating any achievement to and including a merit journalism scholarship, and so forth. But I think it was it was right before I graduated from high school. And we were in the car. My mother run into the grocery store, and he was picking at me about something. And I finally just stepped right into my confidence and said, "Why is it that nothing I do is ever good enough for you? An A- isn't good enough for you. I was in the top 15% of my class. Why not the top 10? I don't understand." And he looked in the rearview mirror at me. Our eyes met, and he said, "Well, if I think that you're 7/8 perfect, I'm going to focus on the 1/8 that it takes to get you there For him, perfection was um, could be accomplished. I just wasn't doing it.
Yeah. Do you think that his treatment of you was what did he have PTSD from Vietnam? Did
No,
that not at all?
no, he was an officer, so he was in
Ah,
charge of a radar site. So he wasn't. When you think of Vietnam, he wasn't out in fatigues in combat, um, and he was an only child, and he was raised. Um, I mean, his parents maintained, they did well through the Depression. My grandfather owned his own printing company, and so he didn't want for anything. Um, there, there is really no reason other than based on my research that it's a personality disorder. And the thing
mm.
that makes narcissism, it's kind of like borderline personality disorder. It's impossible to treat. First, because they don't think it's chemical in nature, so an antidepressant isn't going to do anything, or any kind of mood altering um, drug isn't going to do anything. But they also won't seek therapy because everything is fine with them. It's everybody else. If everybody else would just do what I want, life would be good. They don't
It's
see.
it's a little bit has a little bit so like you say borderline sociopathic qualities because typically a sociopath simply does not see anything wrong with himself. Everything that is wrong is with others always. They also have no
Absolutely.
sense of remorse or conscience about what they do.
Oh, he didn't. Never. There was never. I actually do not remember a time in my 56 years with him that um, he offered an unsolicited apology to either me or my mother or to really anybody else. He was right, you know, he
Yeah,
about everything. And it,
to his
yeah,
dying day, I guess, huh?
beyond,
Yeah.
beyond. Yeah. I mean, he managed to stick it to me even from death with the final letter that he penned, which basically started out, you know, I've lived a wonderful and full life. My greatest regret is that we couldn't have had a better relationship. I'm like, it wasn't my fault. I tried. And then it went
Just
on for
leaving you with the guilt trip right away, right at that point. Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah,
Do you, okay, I'm asking very personal questions here, but I hope you don't mind that because obviously the book is an autobiography of what you went through. And I think this podcast should speak to the truth of what happened because I think your book is very relevant. I think it will speak to many, many people who have gone through it. How are you dealing today? Do you still feel that you're peeling off this like an onion skin, the effects of that trauma or that you went through for 55, 56 years under him?
absolutely. There, most days I feel like I'm fine, and then something will trigger a memory, or I will be triggered by somebody else's behavior, and the anger comes back that it didn't have to be like that, and I didn't deserve it, and it was never about me. It was always about him. I wasn't
Mm,
at fault, even though I still grapple with that. But I've now learned when interacting with people, and I start getting this visceral feeling like that I need to walk on eggshells and that I need to be the good girl. I realize I'm very likely dealing with a narcissist, and it's probably better for me because I'm a huge empath, and empaths and narcissists love empaths. And so I just need to really put up my boundaries and be cautious. I don't think I'm ever going to shake it completely. Um, because now that I'm a writer and I'm out there shopping books, it's kind of the same thing of I need to be perfect and the books have to be
yeah,
perfect. And it's low level, but it's like a virus. It's always going to be latent
yeah,
inside of me.
yeah, yeah. It's a tough situation, and especially, I mean, and like you said, there are narcissists out there, and they like to go after the people that they think are vulnerable. Empaths, like yourself, I feel like I'm one too. You tend to want to be responsible, like as if you're the cause of whatever they're complaining about or whatever, you know, like we tend to introvert on ourselves or try to at least, yeah, find out what we're doing. Whereas that's exactly what they want you to do. They want you to introvert and think about how bad you are or how you messed it up or
Right. And then they want the fawning, the corresponding fawning that comes
that's
from,
right.
I'll do better, or whatever the response is. And it's not healthy because but you know, it, it's really hard to get out of that spider web.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, looking back on that 54 years, do you think that was there a point where you wanted to just get out of like cut him off completely from your life, but then something happened that stopped it or prevented it? Was there any threshold like that you almost got to?
There were numerous times that we would go months, even when I was younger, we would go months without interacting. And we lived in the same city um, because he had said or done something that I felt was inappropriate. And I just needed to distance. And inevitably, it would be my mother that would kind of draw me back into the fold. He is your father and he's the only father you're ever going to have. And, one day he's not going to be here and you're going to be, sorry, those types of things. So as I said earlier, she was complicit. The guilt of his silent, the silence, and then the guilt of that my mother imposed kind of, I would take a deep breath, excuse me, and go back in and just think this
Mm.
time, this time it's going to be better. True sign of insanity, right? As they say, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Expecting a different result. Yeah.
That was my insanity, but
Yeah.
it was responsive insanity.
Mm. No, that's a good answer. I mean, that is the problem when you're dealing with narcissists and sociopaths and borderline personality. They don't change. They simply do not change. Just statistically.
Never.
So
But
you're banging your head up against the wall when you're dealing with them.
they're also very chameleon. And so my father, when he wanted to, could turn on the charm. And I
Yeah.
watched him do it with others, but he could equally turn on the venom, and sometimes within the same hour. And so I could never relax around my father, never, um, because I never knew what was going to set him off. Um, and just, yeah,
Mm.
the only really positive memory I have, and it's in a very bleak context, but um, excuse me, the year before he died, he was in the hospital for 2 weeks in very bad condition. He went in for one thing, and that he was at a teaching hospital, so of course all the
Mm.
specialists were descending upon him, and he just continued to deteriorate while they were playing the whack-a-mole game of trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And I was just watching him get thinner and sicker. And so I at the time, it was during COVID. And so I was able to work from home, but I would take my laptop up to the hospital and stay with him and excuse me, and then run interference with the different specialists and ask questions and advocate for him. And I think those 2 weeks were kind of like the most gentle ever in our 56-year relationship, of just that he kind of ceded control to me. So I was the one that was doing the research. I was the one that was asking the doctor questions. And, if he snapped, I would kind of pull them aside and say, that's just the way he is. Don't take it personally. But it was, in that 2 weeks, I thought, if he recovers from this, whatever this is, there is a real chance that we might finally have the relationship I've always dreamed of. Well, he got out of the hospital and he bounced back to pretty decent health, and then things returned to normal, as if my
Normal as in the way it was before.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a narcissist, and specifically my father, they view people as tools. What can you do
Yeah.
for me? So in that instance, I was the tool that was making sure that he was getting the best possible care because I know how to research, pretty
Mm.
well versed in certain things, and he needed me. There was nobody else that would have done that for him, could have done that for him.
Right. Right.
My mother was the tool that gave him sort of social legitimacy since she was a federal litigator and then she went on to be a federal judge before she retired. And she cooked for him and she did his laundry and all of those things. And then the women with whom he had affairs were tools to serve other desires, shall we say. So just
Was
a
she aware, but was she, when you talked
yes.
about your mother being complicit, was she just trying to sort of not see what he was doing to you, or did she not have a problem with it, or she thought it was up? I don't quite understand the dynamic there.
She was so very codependent on my
Mm,
father. And so, they would have their fights as outlined in the book, but then she would always come back and take his side. And so I think that either he had her convinced or she believed that when he was this hard on me, that it was for my benefit.
okay.
And it wasn't. It
No,
was
of
it
course
was
not.
to my detriment. And she really never really sympathized with me about it.
That's
So
tough, man. That was tough.
yeah.
I'm going to ask you one other personal question, and then I'll sort of get off this train of thought. It, because you talk a lot about trying to sort of live up to his standards and get his approval. Did you love him? Was love part of this thing, or was it more fear or more anxiety that drove that?
You were the first person that has in my life ever asked me that question.
Okay.
And it's an interesting one because excuse me, I think longing and love are two very different concepts. I think I I don't know that I loved him. I was afraid of him and I wanted to please him.
Mm,
And he was the authority figure in my life long after I was grown up. You know, I know that I didn't like him, but did I love him? I loved the idea of him.
right. As a father.
I love the idea having friends and having had friends throughout my life that had such a close, girlfriends who had such close relationships with their father and they were daddy's little girl. And I longed for that. And so
Mm,
I loved the idea that maybe someday, if I just do the right thing, I'm going to unlock the last, number in the lock is going to roll into place and the vault's going to open and this outpouring of love is going to come my way. But that isn't love.
no, no. That's a good answer. It's a good answer.
Thank you.
Um,
Again, you made me think about something I've never thought about before.
well, that's good. That's good. I always try to like poke into the other, open up those doors. But I have read a number of books, not exactly like your book. Your book actually stands out amongst a lot of them, but abuse or trauma. And it occurs to me that in an ideal world, um, there should be some means of educating kids, or certainly young teens, on what a narcissist is, what an abuser is, what a sociopath is, or a borderline personality, so that if they are in, because I think in a lot of cases people don't realize that it's an abnormal situation that's been normalized within the family, but it's not how it should be. But yet, I don't think society or the education system even provides any kind of perspective on this. Am I correct?
You're correct, at least in this country. And I think that that begs then the follow-up question. It's a great idea for a young adult book or some such, but then then the corresponding component of that is when the people if a young person is reading a book that is absolutely descriptive of the family in which they're living or teachers that they have or so forth, what's their recourse? I
Mm.
mean, once you're an adult, you can choose to separate yourself from your family. That seems to be a big trend among Gen Z right now, as I've read that they really, if there's a dysfunctional family situation, they feel very empowered to distance themselves or remove themselves altogether. But no, we don't. I think the most that we talk about, we spend a lot of time educating kids about stranger danger and if somebody touches you inappropriately, you should report it. But when you get into these psychological issues, at least for me, I thought I was the crazy one. And how do you teach kids that if these things are happening, you're not crazy, you're dealing with somebody that is abusing you?
Exactly.
It's a really interesting concept. I've talked a lot to my daughter about this. She's 25. And she chose not to have a relationship with my father as she became a teenager because he was starting to do the same things to her that he was doing to me. And I flat out stood in between them, but then she made her choice of just, I'm not spending time with him anymore. So she's familiar with the concept of narcissism. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to write this book, and I almost didn't publish it, it took a lot of soul searching before I was willing to put it out there. But one of the reasons that I felt so strongly about writing it is that I feel like we need to normalize having conversations about narcissism, which is interesting. I did some research on this, and of the American male population, 7.6% will be narcissists or are narcissists. Interestingly,
Right.
only 4.7 percent of women will be narcissists. So the reality is we're going to encounter one or several at some point. Um, and I wanted to normalize the discussion of what it looks like and how to handle it, and that you can, in fact, I won't say recover completely. You can heal and you can move on.
Well, yeah, and I think it's that knowledge is power, and if you know it, if you know what you're dealing with, then at least you can figure out how to navigate it. I mean, any teenager can go, okay, hell, my father or my mother or my uncle, he's a sociopath, he's abusive. Now I know what I am dealing with, you know. I mean, like you said, statistically, it's what 7% plus are sociopaths in the male gender area. I mean, I think statistically speaking, in the psychological world, it's pretty much established that what is it now? I think it's 4% of the population are categorically sociopaths. So,
Yeah.
you're going to run into these people, and unfortunately, they're going to be in the family. And like you said, lacking any kind of manual or education on this, kids don't know what they're dealing with. They don't know they don't even know how to define it. They think maybe it's normal, or like you said, it's normal to think that you're the problem and not your parents because there's supposed to be some kind of a standard or a figure that you look up to. It's interesting. I think it's quite a lack, and I think that's why I felt that your book was very relevant because you're coming out and you're talking about a subject, like it's sort of like the Me Too movement. Okay, women are coming out and saying we were being sexually abused,
Yeah.
and yeah, we need to normalize this conversation too, because these guys get away with it if we don't make it transparent.
Well, and I mean, the scar, it's such an insidious form of abuse because it's presented under the heading of, I'm just saying this because I love you and I want what's best for you or whatever. And that's not it at all. It's about control.
That's
And,
right.
and it's, as I said earlier, a good narcissist is going to make sure that you think it is your fault all the
That's
time.
right.
And then you think you're hyper aware in every relationship. If a person looks askance at you or doesn't return a text immediately or something, that anxiety, I mean, it's just visceral. It just kind of bubbles up like, what did I do? What did I do? Are they going to leave me? Are they I mean, it's ridiculous, the machinations, the internal machinations that
Um,
I go through, and I don't think I'm unusual in this regard. But I've talked to a lot of people who've read the book in different author groups that I'm in, and it helped them diagnose relationships that they didn't know how to give a description to. They just knew
exactly.
that it was a messed up relationship, and so um, and I ask a lot of questions. when I talk to people, um, one of the things that I researched is it was a great article in Psychology Today that narcissism and addiction go hand in hand,
Mm,
because whatever the source the narcissist is addicted to, they are in pain internally that they're
mm,
not going to give voice to. So they seek the comfort in the form of food or gambling or spending money or alcohol, or in my father's case, sex, to
right.
to assuage those feelings of deep inadequacy that
Mm,
they have, but they don't ever let on that they feel deeply inadequate. They get over feeling inadequate by being superior and critical and controlling of everybody around them. Other differently said, the best defense is a good offense.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly correct. But it's a
Yeah.
sociopathic quality, and then also sociopaths, narcissists are they're very good actors. They're very good at putting on a face, and so you can't quite see through the facade all the time. You know,
Oh no, they're charming.
they're charming. They can put on, they can love bomb you, and at the same instant, like you said, there can be that venomous sting, and you're like, oh, what was that all about? And you're gaslighted, and now you're interior, you're sort of in your head trying to figure it all out, and that's what they wanted. You know,
That's
it's a
right.
control thing.
Well, it's, they're taking up rent-free headspace all the time.
That's a
Um,
good one. I like that.
it really is, and and then my father's, well, he would say things, but the worst came in the form of what I used to call his poison pen. First letters, and then once email was a thing, I'd get the poison emails where he would just blast me up one side and down another. And um, again, it that kind of pain, I can't really equate it to anything else.
No, no, I understand. You know, okay, let's just, we're going to jump ship on that one now. I think we've covered the background of the book. I mean, I don't want to, obviously the book is going to go into a lot of detail, and it does. And so we'll leave it at that so we don't do any spoilers. I was
Okay.
interested, you got into the marketing and communications areas in a career. You got a lot of prestigious awards or titles given to you, like, as you know, talk about that a little bit. What
I was really blessed to love what I did most days of my 35-year career.
mm,
I got into it, I kind of fell into this career. As I said, my degree is in English. And my father used to say, well, I really hope you plan to marry well or become a teacher because you're never going to make a living with a degree in English. I managed to, through a friend of my mother's, get my foot in the door with a very prestigious PR and ad agency here in Dallas, um, kind of talking my way into an internship, and quickly realized that I had a profound talent for PR, advertising, and marketing. And my career just kind of took off. So I won um, numerous awards, both I and the teams that I led, for creative and marketing excellence. Um, in 2020, there's an organization group here in the United States called Reagan Communications PR Daily. It's kind of considered the gold standard for public relations and marketing professionals. And so they had introduced the Top Women in Communication Award in
mm,
2020, and I was nominated by a peer, and I was one of 97 women in the United States in the inaugural year of that award to be a top woman in communications. I was one of seven, specifically in the visionary category, because of the kind of the advertising concepts and creative that I came up with that was so different than anything in the industry verticals that I was in at the time. And so that was a highlight of my career. The downside was I was notified in January of 2020. And so there was supposed to be a big to do at a very fancy hotel in New York. which of
And
course
they were
got
going in the middle of COVID, right?
because of COVID. And then we're going to move it to the fall. No, maybe actually we're just going to send you the trophy or the piece of crystal and be done with it. But earlier in 2014, I was named um, 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 Fort Worth Business Press, um, a great woman of Texas
Oh,
for, and that was, again, I was nominated for that. And they fielded about 24 women a year from this area. And it was based on a combination of professional achievements, social, community contributions. Um, I think that was the two. So
wow.
I was very honored to receive that as well. I mean, it just, as I used to always say, we don't work for awards, but it's really validating to get them,
Yeah,
particularly
exactly.
in a very competitive field, which I was in.
No, it's impressive. It impressed me when I read that in your bio. But this is a bit of a leading question on my part, leading up to the next real question. I mean, you've come up through an era here where, women's rights and equality has been an issue, obviously. Um, and yet you came out on the top level there. I mean, what were the challenges in getting up there? Were you up against challenges, or was the community you worked in, was it wide open to you for, or were you up against a man's world, a sort of a patriarchal?
The majority of my career, up until the last 9.5 years where I was working for a college district, I was in male dominated companies. And in my earliest corporate position, I was 26, and it was a large healthcare company that had been one of my clients, and they ended up hiring me to come in house. So at the time, I was 26. Um, in meetings with and interacting with and taking direction from men twice my age. This would have been in 1991. And
Mm,
so it was still a very different world. And there were more times than not that I was hit on, for lack of a better term, or spoken to inappropriately. And at the time, there wasn't a Me Too movement. There wasn't, all you could do if you wanted to keep your job was just kind of smile and distance yourself, or just say, oh, you're so funny, and then just laugh it off as if it were a joke.
mm, yeah.
But no, I mean, I learned that dance pretty quickly. And going back to, again, my book, because I am so keenly aware of nuance, I I could read what was happening probably before the male knew what was happening, in terms of just, I yeah, I'm feeling a vibe, and I need to be professional, but I can't mouth off.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that I've seen this, and I've talked about this with other authors too. But you're at the disadvantage, so you have to sort of tune up your other perceptions and your mental acuity to deal with this what's the word, well, the position that puts you in. You're squeezed in that in a man's world.
You
It's
are. And like I said, with the company that I was with, that I described, the CEO and I were in an elevator, and I was his speechwriter, among other things. And so we were riding up in the elevator one morning, and we were just, making small talk because I liked him quite a bit. And at one point, my hair wasn't quite as short as it is now, but it was short. And he looked at me and he said, you know, have you ever thought about letting your hair grow? You'd be so much prettier with longer hair. And I just looked at him and I smiled and I said, well, it's a good thing that that's not one of the requirements for my job. As the elevator opened, have a good day. So you learn, you
yeah,
know,
you
but
had to just push it off.
I shouldn't have had to say that. I shouldn't have been asked the question.
Shouldn't have been asked the question. Yeah.
Right.
But that was I just caught my attention. I wanted to ask that one of you.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
So today, we're getting near the end here, but today, I mean, your father is gone now, and And obviously, in writing the book, I think, like you said, it was very cathartic just to get that on paper and get it out. Um, how are you dealing with it all? I mean, is it? I asked you earlier if anything was still bubbling up, but now do you feel like you're like 90% ahead of that curve, or?
I'd say 80%, to be
Okay.
fair, because it's still something that, and it's, I'm trying to learn to be kinder to myself and to not hear those same tapes, as my therapist would have described it, when I'm anxious about something or when I'm, disappointed in something that happened. I'm really trying to learn to figure out how I feel about it, not how my father would have felt about it and phrased it. There's a One of the things that's been really interesting, I've shared this with quite a few people. There's a fundamental tenet that you can have freedom or you can have security, but you can't have both. And so now that now that he's gone, I have the freedom, both of my parents, I have the freedom to kind of make decisions without wondering what they would think about them or what kind of
Right.
criticism would follow. The flip side is it's sometimes terrifying because I don't have anybody to immediately reflect back to me, oh, you really messed up, or that was a dumb decision, or, and it's sort of an untethered feeling that I'm still kind of learning, and it's nice, but it's also yeah, when you're so used to having ongoing commentary, like, play by play commentary of everything you're doing in your life, and then that stops. It's it's glorious freedom that is sometimes terrifying.
I understand totally. How much I mean, do you feel guilty or do you blame yourself for what happened? Is there a lot of like internalized guilt feeling about letting your having let that go on for so long in your life, or have you sort of come to terms and forgiven yourself for all of that?
I didn't have a choice, not one that I could see.
Okay.
So I did what I could live with.
Mm.
My greatest fear, and it bore out, was that, like, before my mother's Alzheimer's took over, I made sure, and she was not an easy mother, but I made sure that nothing was left unsaid between us. I didn't want her to pass without us just getting everything out. I wanted the same for my father. I wanted us to reach a point of resolution, and that he died without any form of closure. That was difficult. I had hoped that there would be a conversation that we could have that would all of a sudden explain the last 56 years, and it didn't happen. I'm angry about that, and I'm sad about that in equal measure. But at the end of the day, um, my husband and others routinely say, knowing all of this, how did you turn out the way you did? And it's because I've had a lot of very loving people in my life, and
Uh,
and I've had a lot of therapy.
yeah, well, you're a success story. You are a walking success story, and I got to say, it's just that's impressive. The whole thing
Thank
coming out,
you.
and I think it also takes a lot of courage to come out and just talk about your life with that amount of detail, and not just make it sound like you're the victim of somebody else all the time. You kind of gave a lot of perspective in the book, so it was easy to identify with some of the things. I think everybody has a little bit of this abuse, or maybe a lot, this kind of stuff. Where because the matrix, the familial matrix, is what molds people. So if the matrix is off, um, yeah, it can be really problematic.
There's so many cliches out there, but when you don't have a stable foundation, how do you build a stable building? And
Uh,
I feel pretty stable. I have my moments, but um, I it I think it's my sheer force of will that it could have gone in so many different directions. I could have turned into a hardcore alcoholic or gone into abusive. Any number of things could have happened to me that didn't. Um, and I'm blessed for that.
Mm.
But that's not to say, and I said at the beginning of the book, I've had a relatively privileged life, but narcissistic abuse knows no class limit, no
No,
racial limit. I mean, it's an equal opportunity a form of abuse. And
that's a
so
good term. I like that. Yeah,
it's agnostic. It's
yeah,
and it's I just want people to not feel for so many years if they read the book. I want them to get to the point where they realize what some of my reviewers have said, which was it was never about you. It was
right.
never about you.
Yeah, and it was none of that was your fault. I mean, there's nothing about you as an individual that justifies any of that treatment, period.
Right, right.
And that was clear in the book. I just wanted to make it clear now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, one more question, two more questions. You said you have another book. Is it already published or is it coming out soon?
No, it's in review. I'm trying to decide. I'm shopping it to publishers, and at a certain point, I might self-publish. I don't know. Still working that out, but it is entirely. It's the first novel I've ever finished. I've started writing five, starting when I was 19. They're all up locked in my office somewhere. It's the first novel I've ever finished, and it's set in night.
Is it a fiction novel? Is it
Yes,
fiction? Okay.
it's women's upmarket fiction. It's set in 1978 is when it starts in a fictitious town that I made up outside of Richmond, Virginia. And it's all about the complexity of women's relationships, friends, frenemies, and then it deals a lot with class, uh, tradition versus progress. I mean, there are a lot of social issues that I deal with in the book. Um, but there's a lot of snark in the book. My beta readers have compared it to sweet magnolias or fried green tomatoes. It's a delightful romp that I had a great time writing, and yeah, the book is called The Pebble in the Pond, and it is about how one person, despite what we've been led to believe in the world, one person's behavior and authenticity and just their sheer presence can positively impact, ripple effect an entire community. And that's what this book is about.
It's great, great story. So you have to let us know at iWake when that one's
Oh, I
available.
will. I will. And
Yeah,
then I'm
for
working
sure.
on its prequel right now, which begins in 1927. So having a lot of fun with that.
All right, that's going to be a great story. Sounds good. All right, last question. As you recall from the interview we did with Kate, right? Cat
Cat.
Pilot.
Yes.
Um, you're a published author, so what advice would you give to novel writers coming up into the fold?
I would say limit how much research you do, or you will get discouraged before you even start. There are so many people writing or who want to write. Focus on the writing first and tell the best story that you can as authentically as you can, whether it's fiction, memoir, nonfiction, you name it. The work is the writing, then worry about the rest of it. But also, for me, I think it's so important to understand why you write. And if you want to write because you have this elusive dream of being on the New York Times bestseller list, check yourself, because the reality is minuscule chance of that happening. I don't write for the money. I write because I have things to say and I know what I have to say. So find your why and then proceed accordingly.
Brilliant. It's a great answer. And
Thank
we
you.
do have a lot of people who watch these the podcast videos later. So I've had authors comment on just these wise words. So I'm sure this will ripple down.
Thank
Um,
you.
Suzanne, it's been a great talk. I mean, really, I really enjoyed digging into your life, and I hope it wasn't too intrusive.
You can't write a book like this without expecting to talk about it. And that was interestingly, some of my friends were saying, "Are you sure you want to talk about this indefinitely?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I think people need to learn and they
Yeah,
need to hear.
yeah, I think
So
it was a
your
brave
question,
thing to do.
your questions were great.
Okay, great, great, great. So, all right. So, yeah, we'll post this podcast to our podcast page so you can refer people there. It'll be posted permanently. And
Mhm.
we'll also send a copy of the interview to you so you can use it as you will.
Thank you so much. I truly believe you and others who do what you do are saints for those of us who are trying to get the word out about our book. And you wrote such a lovely review, and I just thank you so much for believing in the book.
Well, it was a pleasure to read the book and great talking to you.
Likewise, I look forward to it again when the novel comes out.
Yeah, we'll do it again. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, Suzanne, have a great week.
Thank you. You do the same.
All right. Bye now.